Let's sit nice and tall and close the eyes. And just take a few breaths, appreciating the moment. Notice how every cell of your being is interacting with the moment. Every cell of your being is receiving sensory input. Either neutral, peaceful, or maybe enjoyable, or irritating in some way, shape, or form. And so just notice how your physical body is receiving the moment. How is your physical body being in this collection of seconds? Now go beyond the physical body, deeper than the cells, go to the atomic level. There's something happening there too in this moment. Maybe it's not really happening, it just is. On the atomic energetic level, how are you in this moment? That's the space beyond reaction. That's the space beyond the wanting of sensory impressions. It's the place where no impressions are necessary. Not really. Except perhaps awareness. A little bit of the self is still there as you are feeling the underlying peace, feeling the flow, the softness, the gentleness of it all. And then go beyond that. If you can, go even beyond that. Go to the place where you've lost yourself, your identification with your ego. Go to the place where there is nothing and everything all at once. And all these things merge together as consciousness. Whatever level or layer you're at, just breathe there for a moment. Breathe and be. Notice it for all it is. Its changeability. And then draw the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om and the invocation mantras. Taking a breath in. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata anashrinvanuti besidha sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha. Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhirvajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahatav Parvatada Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagmam Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. And then gently releasing the hands down, gently flutter the eyes open. And so the little mini journey that I just brought you on for the opening was just a small exploration of the levels of you, the layers of you. And so we have this physical level, this layer of flesh and bones. This is the place within ourselves where our sensory organs exist. This is where we're pulling constantly in information. Is it cold out? Is it warm? Is it, am I hungry? Am I not hungry? It's where all of those impressions, is the sky blue or is it kind of cloudy and gray? All of those impressions are coming in through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, through the skin. And it's all little data bits, little information that sets us up for our supposed understanding of our condition in a given moment. And it's kind of true, sort of, in a subjective way, that we look out and we see the blue sky and we relate a certain energy to that, and so we adopt that energy within ourselves. Now, this is the way we're made. This is nature. We have senses. There's sensory perception. That's what this body does. It pulls in all of this information and then it goes to the mind, and the mind categorizes it and files it away for some, future thing that it might be needed for. And that's pretty much how much we know ourselves. Based on the sensory impressions that we collect over time. At least that's true for people who don't really practice too much awareness, who don't really practice mindfulness of some sort or another. They stop at the sensory perception. And the sensory perception leaves us very short-sighted when it comes to ourselves and to the world, because it's a reactive place usually. And so we react to the clouds. We react to the sun. Oh, it's raining. I don't want the rain. It's no sunshine out there. I feel sad. Oh, the sun is out. I have to go to the beach. We're always reacting. And in a place of reaction, we don't pay much attention to anything else. We don't have the space for it. And so we think that the sun is everything or the cloud is everything and that there's nothing else. But then you come into a gentle practice, just even the most superficial, shallow practice. And I don't mean shallow egotistically, I just mean it's very superficial. Just a superficial practice of paying attention to the breath, of going beyond those sensory impressions to another level of yourself, what we could call a subtle energetic level, the level of the atomic energy that flows through you. And kind of a cosmic energy that flows through you. And you bring your awareness there, and all of a sudden, the senses aren't really activated there. Little bit, little tiny bit. There is a softness that accompanies that experience. So you know that your ego is still present because you do like it, or you don't. Why wouldn't anybody like it? Well, I'll get to that in a moment, maybe. But generally speaking, there is a sense of, oh, there is relief here. And relief generally leads us to a feeling of pleasurableness. We like that. We enjoy relief. So there is still a sense of the ego there, but it's nowhere near as much. And we're not so busy because we're not collecting 10,000 different sensory impressions. We're actually, for at least a second or two, invested in one. And that's the relief that deep energetic level holds for us. Now, I said some people like it. I would suggest most. Some people don't like it. Why on earth would somebody not like the experience of relief? And the answer to that is because they don't know what on earth to do with it. They have no idea. It freaks them out. It makes them a little wonky in the brain. They're like, no! You ever go to somebody, you're having a conversation, they ask you a question, and you give them an honest answer, and they look at you and they say, no, you just don't understand. They never wanted the answer to begin with, because they already have an inkling of what the answer is in their own heart and mind. But if they acknowledge that answer, then they have to admit that everything they've been investing up until that point in time is actually not as valid as their ego wants to believe it is. So they don't want to hear it. They say no. It's the same thing. Student comes to a class, maybe first time, maybe 100th time, whatever it happens to be, and they access that other layer, that energetic, that subtle energy layer, that atomic layer, just for a second. And they're like, whoa, that's some kind of witchcraft. That's some kind of Satan worship. That's some kind of not normal. Because that's not me. I'm this. I'm not this. What'd you do to me? You brainwashed me. You hypnotized me. They're not ready for that experience because they don't know anything about themselves other than what the sensory impressions do to them. And so in some part, the meditative and concentrated practices that lead us there get a really bad name because it scares the bejesus out of people because they don't know what to do with themselves if everything is not exactly as they think it is. See, that level, that atomic level, requires that you take a lot of responsibility. People are really great about talking about responsibility, aren't they? They're like, you be responsible. Da, 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 da. As long as you listen to me, then you're responsible. People talk a lot about responsibility, but they know zero about it. Very little, maybe 1%. Maybe they know 1% about it. They know how to tell you how to take responsibility. They know how to tell you all how to take responsibility, but they don't know how to take responsibility for their own self. If they did, then that energetic space, the atomic space, would not bother them at all. They would seek it out. They would say, this is my dharma, is to find this out about myself, to know this about myself, that I am not just a bundle of sensory receptors, that in fact there's something else to me, which is a great relief. A peace. It's my responsibility to unfold that, to discover that and rediscover it about myself. And therefore, I don't have time to tell you how to be responsible because I'm too invested in my own journey of figuring this out for myself. I love people who give relationship advice and never been in a relationship. Hell, don't listen to those people. They tell you how it should be. But they don't have it. They've never even attempted it. Somebody comes up to you and tells you how to be angry with your partner. What you should and shouldn't take, and yet they don't know. It's all part of the sensory perception play. Even those kinds of conversations are part of the sensory perception because you're hearing and you're seeing and it's all coming into the mind and the mind is categorizing and putting it in certain places. And we see this in music a lot today. We see this in music a lot. Oh. I love all genres of music. I think music is an amazing healing tool, but I think that it is so narcissistic at times and so hypocritical. And these people creating music are just so hypocritical sometimes. They're given, like Taylor Swift now is getting some kind of flack because she curses in her songs. And somebody came out and said, she mentions drug use in her song. She says, you smoked and then you ate 7 bars of chocolate. And then after that, what did she say? She said, and you keep listening to the song as a result of me saying this, And in the meantime, you look at their music and what is in their music? Basically pornography. all about drug use, all about alcohol abuse, all about abuse. So, and all of that is sensory perception and sensory overload, you know. So the individual who is invested in self-responsibility is invested in the self and says, I don't need to get invested in all of that drama out there because it's not real. It's the mind trying to make sense of something that makes no sense. It's the mind trying to make the ego important, all important. Well, I can be important because I have an opinion. It's like, nope, that doesn't make you important. That doesn't make you important just because you have an opinion. As a matter of fact, nothing that you can do makes you important. Who you are beyond the field of the impressions is what makes you special and important. Because once you come into contact with that innermost self and the relief, the peace, then you become a power in the world, a power for peace and goodness, rather than just another reaction. There's plenty of reactions out there. Just open a newspaper or put Facebook on. Plenty of reactions, you know? So many reactions. We don't need more reactions. We need more relief. So we go to that second level to whatever degree we can. And it's not a failure success thing. It's not like, well, I've been trying to access that and I just can't. I guess I'm just no good at meditation. That has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with how are you getting there? What avenue are you taking? Are you taking the avenue of bypass? Or are you taking the avenue of, I'm going to stop at every scenic outlook along the way and I'm going to address what I see? Are you sweeping everything uncomfortable under the rug and hoping for some kind of a sparkly outcome? Or are you getting messy in the midst of all of the internal work that has to happen in order to go from this place of being a big old sensory perceiver to being a very, very subtle spaciousness? You cannot access the subtle spaciousness without going through all of the things that are keeping you from it. Not possible. If you don't have faith, you have to address that. If there's a lot of hatred toward people in your life, you have to address that. If there's a lot of hatred toward yourself, you have to address that. And this is an issue in the spiritual world today because there's a lot of self-hate happening out there. There's a lot of outward hate happening out there. And there's a lot of people claiming that they go in here. Why would you go in here if you hate yourself? Why would you even bother doing that? You wouldn't. You wouldn't. If you are experiencing so much self-hatred, you have no interest in knowing yourself because you don't love yourself. There has to be love. At least compassion to start with. At least empathy. At least a recognition of the struggle that each and every person has been on. Starting with yourself. Well, I always feel very sad when someone says, I can have the greatest empathy for other people, but I have no patience for me. It's so true. It's a very, very true statement to some degree. But I would suggest that this is a more appropriate statement. I have so much pity for other people, but I don't like myself at all. Pity and empathy are not the same thing. Pity is looking at someone and feeling sorry for them. Feeling sorry for another human being is not empathy in any way, shape, or form. So we take our inward dislike of our own self and we turn it into pity for others, and we call it empathy or compassion. But it's not. It's a comparison, actually, at its best. It's a comparison and saying, oh, your situation's pretty bad. I guess maybe my situation is worse or better. And then using that as some kind of a I don't know, way to understand life. What's your condition versus my condition? Where am I on the scale? This is not knowing the self. This is not knowing the self at all. Being invested in these types of behaviors has nothing to do with knowing yourself. Nothing whatsoever. It keeps us invested in chasing our tail when we live that way. We chase our tail. When we practice a mindfulness practice and we go to that just ever so slightly deeper level where maybe we still are of the sensory impressions and they're still functioning and activating, but not as intensely, but we're also aware of something else. We are aware that there's an underlying current, there's an underlying current that's not crazy or wild or wavy. It's just kind of there. And then we're in that place, that in-between place. Do I go to what is familiar or do I go to what is unknown? And there lies the second dilemma, because the unknown is scary as hell, and most of the time we'll turn away from it. It's like when you're swimming in the ocean, some people just go up to like their ankles, and you ask them, well, why don't you just go out a little deeper? The water's not very, very wild today at all. It's very nice. Oh, no, because you never know what the undercurrent's going to do to you. That's what we're talking about here, the undercurrent. You don't know what the undercurrent's going to do to you, so you stay the hell away from it. You go to the edge. You go ankle depth, maybe shin. And with some yoga practices and some grace, you go to the knee or the thigh, but you don't often dive in. You don't often dive in. Because what's there if you dive in? What's there that you'll recognize? What's your anchor? What do you know about yourself there? And the reality is, you don't know much at all. Because there is no little less self there. Or at least it's very minimal. And most people are afraid that if they go there, even where there's still a little bit of a little S self, and there's a lot of restfulness, a lot of relief, that they're going to like it so much that they're not going to want to come back. They're just going to absorb into the essence of that consciousness. And then the ego goes, no way! Stop right there. Do you know somebody died on this beach? Do you know that beach is called Backbreak Beach for a reason? Do you know there's sharks in the water? Do you know you might step on a crab? You don't want to have to get all that salt water out of your hair after the fact. I mean, like the ego goes bonkers, just thinking up scenarios. This morning I read this article. I found it to be fairly hysterical and also really disturbing. It was about the Toro spiders. Have you heard about them? Now, if you've heard about them, what you've probably heard is that they're this big and they're flying through the sky waiting to land on your face. They don't fly when they're that big. And they don't fly, What they do when they're little tiny babies that are like the size of a sesame seed is that they get caught on the wind or they jump into the wind in order to travel, and they have a little bit of a web that they let out so that they have a bit of an anchor. They just go. But guess what? So does every other spider baby. And yet, we're talking about the Toro spider here. You probably also, if you've heard of them, heard that they are deathly venomous. So's daddy longleg. Did you know that? Daddy longlegs are the most venomous spider in the entire world. But not to you. They can't bite you. Their teeth aren't big enough. Well, the Toro spider's teeth are big enough. When they're full grown, this big. Which, by the way, they don't get that big. Not usually. But their venom is not venomous to you. At the worst, the scientist in the article said, at the worst, it's like itchy like a mosquito bite, or maybe a little pointed like a sting, like a bee sting. And yet our mind, which has taken in all of the sensory stimulation of the pictures and the person holding the biggest spider, the mind goes bonkers. And it's like, I don't know, maybe I should wear a mask when I'm walking outside. You should probably wear a mask everywhere you go, because there's all kinds of stuff that you're breathing in that you know nothing about, But that's what happens to us, We get caught up in these stories, these sensory impressions, and then they become our worldview and they become our view of ourselves. But the reality is they rarely tell us anything at all. Rarely. This scientist, did any of you see that article this morning? It was like on Apple News or something, a National Geographic article. So the scientist said, so take a common every kind of day spider, like a domestic spider, I was going to say, but there's no such thing. But like a regular spider, that you know about. If you stimulate that spider with your breath by blowing on it, the spider will stay still for up to 97 seconds. Up to 97 seconds. Because you've startled it. It's a little bit afraid because this humongous giant is breathing on it. Does that mean it's its next meal? Up to 97 seconds, that spider will stay still. You know how long the Toro spider will stay still? An hour. Because you scared the bejesus out of it. And it does not know what the hell to do. They call it shy. They say it's shy. So these spiders are like not even an issue. And they also claim that they're taking over the world, or at least North America, right? But they're not. They've been found in 4 states so far. Apparently, Oklahoma, Maryland, Georgia is where they found them first. And one other state, I don't know, Kentucky or something. They're not everywhere. There's no sightings of them in the other however many states there are, And yet, they're worth a headline. This is exactly the way the ego works to keep you invested in the world of sensory stimulation and sensory input. And this is exactly how the ego works to keep you away from that underlying level, that layer of subtle energy, and most definitely away from what lies beyond that. The level of absorption, of unity, of dissolution of the ego. So as you're walking through the world, asking yourself, what do I have to do to know peace? Practice more. Practice your sadhana more. Whatever your spiritual practice is, you've got to practice it more. Because that is the only way that you're going to break down the belief systems that have come about as a result of sensory stimulation. As a result of the headlines. As a result of all of those perceptions that keep coming in, that keep getting categorized by the mind. Your sadhana is what supports you in being able to break those down and say, this is definitely not true. This might be a little bit true. This may have some significance, but not to me. This has a lot of significance to me. Now let me understand why. Your sadhana is what allows you to see the difference. And you know this because you're here and you practice, and you all have practices, and you're all doing the work, and you're all catching glimpses of that deeper level of yourself. But how many of you honestly also turn away from that? Everybody's hand should be. You also turn away from it. And why do you turn away from it? Because you're still busy reading the headlines. You're still busy receiving the perceptions. And you're still busy being invested in that. It's the what if. But what if, but what if, but what if? But what if there really are spiders that big? There are. They're called tarantulas. How many of you have seen a tarantula up close and friendly? Aren't they wonderful? They're so sweet, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there with my husband, and our friend had a tarantula. And first thing I said out of my mouth, look, can I hold her? Him, her, whatever. Yeah, of course. He's like, don't do that. It might bite you. I said, it's not going to bite me. So they put it, he starts walking up my arm, and pretty soon he's like up here, and my husband's like, keep that thing away from me. I'm like, they're so sweet. Put your hand out. Overcome your fear of it. You don't need to be afraid of it. It's not going to bite you. And if it did bite you, what's it going to do? It's going to hurt for a little bit, like a bee sting, whatever. Yeah. So he's like, no. But eventually he put it in his hand, and, and he was like really, really nervous about it. Like all of the tarantula movies, Oh, they'll kill you. Like, no, they won't. No, they won't. They're not venomous to you. I think there's like one species of tarantula that has like a venom that will affect a human being. And they live under a rock in the Amazon or something, So it was there, and he was like, that's pretty cool. And I was like, yeah. See what happens when you break through the barrier of a false belief. What happens is that what you find is actually pretty cool. So the next time that you're looking for peace and you are really invested in the distractions, ask yourself, what happens if I just let go of the distraction, the fear, the whatever? What happens? Just for a moment. You don't have to do it forever. Just take a minute. Can't do a minute? Do 30 seconds. Can't do 30 seconds? Do 15 seconds. You can do 15 seconds. You can do 15 seconds. Absolutely. And just see what's waiting for you in the space underlying the perceptions, the stimulation, the distractions. And you don't have to surrender there completely. You don't have to dissolve. But visit. And then come out and journal about it. Do something to keep it in your mind. Because if you have an experience, what makes an experience powerful is when you repeat it to yourself. And when you repeat the experience. So, I had a friend who went to Machu Picchu. What makes that experience even more powerful is their sharing of that experience, because they retell the experience. And then to them, and maybe not to the one who's hearing the story, but to them, they're actually reliving the experience. And so it becomes more and more powerful to their psyche, the more that they share the experience. Does this sound familiar to any of you? Only how do we usually apply that? Mm-hmm. How?
In the negative.
In the negative, exactly. And so what has power over us then? Mm-hmm. The negative. So instead, we go into that space that underlies, into the space that is just a little bit away from the sensory impressions. We have an experience of something there. I call it relief, peace. You come out, you journal about it, and then you talk about it. And you say, I had the most amazing moment. I don't know what the heck it was, but there was so much relief there. I want to visit again. And guess what? You don't have to pay for airfare or a hotel, and you don't have to hike up a mountain, although maybe sometimes it feels like it. The more that you say it to yourself, and the more that you maybe share it with others, if that's, out loud, the more powerful it becomes. I had a friend who asked me one time, she said, we were sitting listening to a teacher that we were studying with at that time. And she said, why does he always say the same thing? Different words, but really the same thing. Aren't there like other stories? Isn't there something else? And I said, well, why do you think he's always saying the same thing? Using different words maybe. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's all there is. And I said, no. Because you need to hear it over and over and over and over again And the reason why you are bored is because you're not believing, having faith. You're not investing. You're looking for the next distraction. 4 books sit right here on the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. You don't need 4 of them. You only need 1. You don't even need the whole Patanjali Yoga Sutra. You only need 1 sutra. With keen observation and discretion, these kleshas become translucent. That's exactly what we're talking about. It's crazy. The kleshas. The story of me, aversion, grasping, ignorance, and fear of death and dying. The last one, fear of death and dying. And the first one, the story of me, Ashmita and Abhinivesha. The story of me is the story we put together based on all, isn't it crazy how that happens? Because of all of the sensory stimulations that have come our way that our mind has categorized so that we can retrieve them later for whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. And Abhinivesha, the fear of death and dying, which is why we stay with only our ankles in. And rather than diving into the undercurrent, as it were, the spiritual undercurrent. Because the fear of death and dying of the ego, the fear of the death and dying of who I think I am, and all the investment that I've made into that. Don't make so much investment in the ego, because the ego is not you. There's a relationship between the ego and yourself, but it's not you. The relationship is that you think it's you. But the ego is really just the mind's way of using all that information in order to control the world or fall victim to it. And the innermost self is not interested in conquering or being victimized. The innermost self has no concern with that. The innermost self says, where's the undercurrent? Please take me there, immerse me, leave me there, because that's where the peace is. Now, that's a pretty radical statement, and for most of us, we're not going to just go there and stay there. We're going to come and go from it. And I suppose that one of the main points of today's talk is to say to you, the next time that you're visiting that very mysterious space of that which is subtly energetic about yourself, don't be afraid of it. Don't be in a rush to get out of there. Don't think that there's something more important out here than what lies in there, because there isn't. The most important thing is what is within, deep, deep within. Have any of you ever done a concentrative practice or a meditative practice and almost felt like your physical body dissolved away? Right? And then there's no barrier, is there? There's no difference between you and I. There's no difference between you and the tree, you and the cloud, you and the sun. There's no difference. There's no difference. But when you open your eyes and re-enter the physical world again, there's a difference. And it may take a few moments for that difference to take control of you again, but inevitably it does, because your spirit is existing within a physical body that's walking through this world of differences. And eventually, sometimes 1 second, sometimes 30 seconds, sometimes a minute later, the ego jumps back forward and grasps on to its ability to have power over you. And it says, you see, the tree is still there. The tree is still there. And you're still here, and that other person is still over there. And there's differences. And those differences are what matter. Not that thing you just experienced. That thing which is fleeting that thing which is too mysterious, you can't name it, you can't control that. What value does it have if you can't control it? And then the ego starts to plant the seeds of doubt within us. Tries to keep us from investing further in the concentrative meditative practices. But a wise individual will recognize that for the folly that it is. And will say, I recognize that my ego is unhealthy when it thinks like that. Because the reality is, the spirit is living in a body. It is being carried about by this body. And it's because of these eyes that I can see and appreciate the beauty of that tree, that I can see and appreciate the beauty of the contrast of the clouds against the sky and the sun's rays coming through. Or I can see and appreciate the beauty of an absolutely gray day. It's because of these eyes that I can see and appreciate that, but I do not need to become invested in it. Because there's a greater beauty. There's a greater beauty. The beauty that lies beyond the field of perceptions and exists only in the field of unity. Because for as much as I sit here and look at that tree and think how beautiful that tree is, there's a part of my mind that's pulling up a little file card, and that little file card says what? This is tick season. No tree hugging right now. You know, as much as I look at that sky and I say, oh my gosh, there's such a beautiful contrast of clouds and blue and with the, it's just stunning. Then the mind is pulling up a little file card, and that little file card is saying air pollution. Or is pulling up two file cards, and the second file card is saying that's only going to last until 1 p.m., then it's going to rain. Do you see what I'm saying? So these perceptions, while there's some kind of a relationship between the body and the spirit and walking through the world, it is not solely to allow you to see and experience the beauty. It's also to take these little impressions that we've gathered along the way and try to apply them, even though 98% of the time, maybe even 99%, they're misapplied because they take us away. These perceptions take us away from seeing the truth that lies at the center of everything. In order to know that truth, you have to go within your own self. Allow the physical to melt away, to dissolve, and experience unity by way of that flow of cosmic energy. Don't just put your foot in up to the ankle. Go a little deeper. And the more that you do that, the more you'll know peace. But the more you keep asking yourself, why, the more you're investing in the perception. Does that make sense? Yes.
But so the only way to get under the surface is through meditation and
concentrative practices. Well, they're not the only way. They're certainly the most direct way. The most direct way. But in the Bhagavad Gita and many of the other texts, it says to be of selfless service to others is another way. It's very hard to be of selfless service to others in a world where everybody wants a thank you. Oh, I don't want to thank you. And then in another conversation, they didn't even say thank you. We live in a world today where they call it karma yoga. When you go and work the desk at a yoga studio in return for classes, that's not karma yoga. That is not karma yoga. That's a what do you call that?
Bartering.
What is it?
Bartering?
It's bartering for sure. But there's another word for it also. It's like it's a play on words, you know. It's like, well, this sounds cool. Let's call it karma yoga. It's not karma yoga. Karma yoga is very specifically selfless service. Selfless means I want nothing, I get nothing. I'm not doing this with the expectation that I have anything coming to me for it. I'm doing this. Why? Because who I'm serving is God, and that's enough. What I'm doing, what I'm offering is God, and that's enough. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagna Brahmanahutam Brahmeva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadina Aham Vaishvanara Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyanam Chaturvidam. Blah. Tongue twisted. Yeah. And what that mantra means, it's actually a blessing that's said before food sometimes. And what that mantra says is that the food is God. The process of preparation of the food is God. The fire within is God. And the process of feeding the fire is God. Because all things are God. Knowing this, and now I'm adding, knowing this, and living one's life in a way that recognizes that all things are God, that's karma yoga. I serve God with the food. I serve God in the preparation of the food. I serve God by way of taking care of the internal fire, feeding the internal fire. Everything is God, and everything is an offering to God, and that's karma yoga. But the interesting thing is that, and no offense to anybody who has karma yoga programs, they're just so widespread right now, it's whatever it is. But the irony and the hypocrisy is that 95% of the yoga studios that have a karma yoga program do not have one murti. They don't om. They don't acknowledge God or goddess. They call themselves secular, separate. We don't do that here. Avidya, not wisdom, ignorance. Why are you calling it karma yoga when you have absolutely no interest? My humble opinion. Which can be pretty not humble at times, I suppose. Like everybody else. Let me do a time check. Questions or reflections? Not one question, not one reflection. What do you think? Will you take the deeper dive every once in a while? Yeah.
Well, you said to practice, so the practice is the service and I guess it could be more than just the service and the meditation or concentration.
Breathe, knowingly. Breathing in, I know I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. Something's irritating you? Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. Something's making you really angry? Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Practice breathing. Practice conscious listening. Somebody says something that you like. I heard that. Big smile on your face. Somebody says something that you kind of don't like. I'm listening. Somebody says something you don't like. I'm listening. Somebody says something that you absolutely 100% disagree with and think is 100% wrong. I'm listening. Listen consciously. And don't be passive-aggressive about it. Actually listen. You'll learn things that you never even thought were possible. Somebody is calling you names, insulting you. Listen. There's an opportunity in there to come to understand this person. You don't have to say, well, don't call me that because you're this. All you're doing is throwing fuel on the fire at that point. But if you consciously listen, what you'll find is their fear, their pain, their suffering. You don't take on their words. They don't belong to you. Somebody calls you a name, you don't take that. It's not meant to be a sensory impression that you're supposed to take ownership over. No, you're consciously listening listening. There was who was that? Was it Sean Korn? I think it was Sean Korn. She's an internationally known yoga teacher. I'm pretty sure that it was her. If I have that wrong, I apologize. On Facebook, this person responded to one of her posts and said something really nasty. Really, really nasty to her. And a lot of people started attacking this person. She privately messaged the person and said, I can sense that there's a lot of pain in your response and reaction to what I posted. Can I ask you what's going on with you? What's happening in your life right now? And she said, well, that's so if that's what you feel, that's your right to feel it. But if you ever do want to talk about like what's going on, please know that, you can message me here. It'll come to me. He started to open up to her on there. Come to find out, he was, I believe that he was a veteran who needed some kind of a medical treatment, who wasn't able to get it because the hospital didn't take his insurance and the vet care didn't do this or something along those lines. It had to do with medical care. She put her feelers out into the community and said, there's this person who needs this. How many of you are doctors who would be able to do this pro bono for this person? A bunch of people came forward and said, absolutely, send them to me, send them to me, send them to me. The person got the treatment that they needed. So you see, when you listen consciously, you're not taking ownership over someone else's cruelty. What you're doing is listening for the pain. You're listening for their suffering. You're listening for what they perceive as their truth in that moment, and then holding a space for it. No matter how much they point the finger and say, it's you, it's you, it's you, it's you. You know it's not you. So why are you even playing with that thought? It has nothing to do with you. But you know what? The solution might. And so if you're able to, great. She was able to. She has a huge network of people. She was able to. What if you're not able to? Then part of the solution is not hurting them back. Because that's what they're expecting. They're expecting that if they punch you, then you'll punch back. And then it'll just prove to them that their anger is justified, their self-hate is justified, their hatred of you is justified, their hatred of the world is justified. It's an eye for an eye, people. It's not an eye for an eye. It's your suffering, and I'm holding space for your suffering. But do not put yourself in danger. So please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Right? Yeah.
This has just reminded me of the appreciation for the practice and how we apply it. And that us choosing this path and doing the work amplifies the egos of those around us. And like you're saying, not investing in it. I know that that's something I struggle sometimes to not take that on. Like how we have that inner voice. It triggers in other people and they're sharing it. It's coming from love, but to come back to the undercurrent of what we feel is best. So I really feel what you're saying. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And just kind of along those lines, I had a situation many, many years ago when I first opened, I guess about a year after I first opened, there was a woman who came to class and she stayed after. We were talking for a few minutes. I had just met her. And as we were standing there talking, there were like these big glass pane windows at the front. This woman walked past, looked, stopped, kept walking, turned around, came back, came in, and went up to the other woman and started screaming in her face. And what she said was, I can tell you exactly what's on my mind right now because this is a sacred space and I can say whatever I want here because I have absolute freedom here. So I stepped in the middle of the two of them and I said, I hear the pain in your voice and I hear that there's some things that you need to talk about. But what you need to understand also in this moment is that your thinking that you can bring violence in here is not correct. If you would like to sit down and talk, the three of us together can sit down and talk and see if there is a bridge that can be built. But violence is not welcome here, and it never will be. she looked at me, and she was filled like with something, and the other woman was so apologetic. She was like, I haven't seen her in years. And I said, look, there's no apologies necessary. People are suffering for all kinds of reasons, most of which have zero to do with you. And the ones that do have something to do with you, then they're for your learning. If you can think back to a time where you ever said or did something to harm this person, she's still carrying the burden of that. Why don't you just alleviate the burden? Say you're sorry. Well, that was 20 years ago. Why should I say I'm sorry now? Because she's still suffering. Period. Yeah. So, conscious listening, holding space, conscious talking, nonviolent communication is huge for people. Absolutely. Concentration practices, meditation, get on your yoga mat. You feel angry, get on your yoga mat. You feel sad, get on your yoga mat. Go on your yoga mat and do a practice because it aligns energies. Rather than letting your energy be going here and here and here, you got to pay attention to the moment, to what you're doing a little bit more. So all these things are practices. Go out and serve, Go pet the dogs and cats at the kennel or at the shelter. Totally. They want love too. I know, right? There's so many. They're not even taking cats right now because there's so many of them. It's kitten season. We were very fortunate. My daughter, a stray cat adopted her family. And so he would come and go. And then he came and he was not looking well. Little tiny, adorable little thing. We thought it was a girl. And then we said, well, we have to try to shoot her ear. His ear was clipped. So he had already been in touch with, the shelter to some degree. So we took him down to the vet, had him completely checked out. He's in really great health other than Lyme disease. He's 2 years old or thereabouts. Cutest little cat in the world. We found a foster home for him, and all he wants to do is be loved. He's like, headbutt. And he crashes into you, He's like, headbutt, pet me. Have you ever seen cats do that? Yeah, totally. He just wants to be a lap cat. He just wants to be loved. Animals just want to be loved. And guess what? Humans are animals. We're animals. He'll headbutt you in all of his softness and maybe bruise your jaw a little bit as he goes, boom. A human being who is longing to be loved will hurt you because they're so scared that A, they're not worthy of love, and B, they won't get the love they need. They'll resort to violence. So understanding that that's how deeply hurt people are. And if we can show up through our practice and the strength and courage that our practice cultivates within us, if we can show up more readily, more willing to love, then we'll contribute to a healthier world for everybody. A healthier ego for ourselves. And maybe even a little bit of a relief for the hearts that we touch. But first you have to find the peace within yourself. Yeah. And be willing to visit it every once in a while. Let's sit tall and close the eyes. Take a nice breath in and a nice breath out. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om and the All Beings mantra. Taking a breath in. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you all so much for being here today. So good to see each and every one of you. I honor the path that each and every one of you walk. I know it's not easy, but I am so happy for you that you have found this path in this life at this time and been given this opportunity on your path to come into some relationship with the deeper self, with the innermost self. And I pray you continue. Absolutely. I'm going to cough again. Excuse me. Enjoy your brunch, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.